It was originally built and opened in 1937. It was not the first train depot in the city of Myrtle Beach. There was a train depot closer to the pavilion down 9th Avenue. But it was strictly it was kind of a quasi multi-purpose train depot, and in the early 30s, the community and the Atlantic Coastline Railroad itself thought that we needed a more substantial facility that could handle both freight and passenger service. So they needed the railroad to get the trees out of Myrtle Beach, and people in Conway started hitching a ride on the railroad cars to come to the beach for the day, and then they would be riding on top of the fallen trees as they were going back to Conway. So people started recognizing that there was potential here for a resort community because people were coming to the beach. So as people started doing that, hotels started being built, the pavilion was built, and all of those materials had to come in somehow. And the roads were pretty treacherous back then. They were kind of sandy and dirt rutted roads, so the rail was the best way to bring in the supplies. And it just kind of grew from there. We had developed into somewhat of a resort town. We had a very fancy hotel called the Ocean Forest Hotel that is up kind of in the 50s, was up in the 50s. It was torn down in the 1970s. But a lot of people would come in on the passenger train and get off at the depot and load into limos and go up to the Ocean Forest Hotel. And there were, lush parties and grand balls, and prominent musicians of the time would be playing there. And so there were some famous people who passed through the train depot. There were also a lot of servicemen that came and went through the train depot. There was an Army airfield where the Air Force Base eventually ended up, and most of the people who were stationed here came and went by train. When the train depot was originally built in the 30s, it was built to be segregated. There was a colored-only section and a white section of the passengers' side of the train station, and there was a wall between them, and the black section was in the back and the white section was in the front. It was interesting that the white section had a men's room and a ladies' room, but the colored section only had one restroom. And if you were in the colored section of the train depot, you had to physically walk out of the back of the train depot and walk around the building to get on the train, where on the white side you could just walk out the door and onto the platform and onto the train. When we restored the building, by the time we had gotten to it, that the wall that had divided them had been taken down simply because it had been used as a warehouse and they needed the room. The all aboard committee made a conscious decision to leave the wall out, but to leave the impression in the floor where the wall had been, so that people would see that it had originally been designed that way, as I guess was a lot of areas of the time, a lot of buildings at that time. The Chapin Company was a pretty prominent company in Myrtle Beach at the time, and they wanted in on the deal as well. But they didn't want just any old train station. They wanted something that when people arrived, they knew that they had arrived someplace special, to a resort town. So they were allowed to vary the Atlantic Coastline design a little bit from an aesthetic point of view. Most of the Atlantic Coastline stations that you'll see along Atlantic Coastline lines have the big freight area and a passenger area pretty much to the same dimensions that we have here, and the loading docks and such. But they allowed the Chapin Company some architectural freedom in the exterior design of the building. Most of the Atlantic Coastline stations aren't brick like ours are, and they allowed kind of a Mediterranean flair to the architecture that we have on our building to go with the architectural style that was on the Chapin building downtown. So ours is special. There isn't another one like it in the country.